Hey there, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Mindset by Dave podcast. For the first time in a long time, it is a solo episode today. I've been planning to do more of these, but I've just had a guest every single week, and actually I do have a guest this week as well. But I think it's about time we got in with the solo episode. And today I want to ask you the question, is mental illness a disability? Now, I'm going to answer that question straight away because I can't wait for your answer because it's a podcast and there's nobody listening to me live whilst I'm making it. And my answer is yes. But the whole reason that I ask the question is because my answer probably wasn't always yes, despite the fact that I have lived with a known mental illness from the age of 14. I thought when it came to my mental health, I thought it was insulting to people with genuine disabilities to think of my mental health as a disability. And there was also a little element that of probably internalized stigma or internalized ableism where I also didn't want to admit to having a disability myself. For anyone who's listening to the podcast who's unaware still, which is surprising because I bang on about it all the time, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder at 14 years old and went on to essentially experience endless mood swings of the highest order. But I hid my condition from my family, from my friends. I suffered in silence. I lived with it on my own. And a lot of my family kind of just thought I was very volatile. They didn't know there was a reason for the volatility. They thought that I got easily upset whenever kind of, that phrase, you're mental, or you're insane or whatever, those things that are becoming much less used now. But they were just kind of general conversation, accepted within general conversation, should we say, back in the 90s. It's like, oh, that's mental, that is. Those words were thrown around like you wouldn't believe. And whenever I was referred to as mental, whereas a lot of other people, when they were doing something a bit bizarre or a little bit wild and being referred to it, they'd just be like, yeah, so what? And then carry on. For me, it was a deeply upsetting experience. And I lived with it, again, by myself for two reasons. One, I didn't want to burden others. I didn't want to burden my mum. I didn't want to burden my family. I'd mentioned about my bullying to my dad, and he just turned around to me and said, you can't possibly be getting bullied. Look at the size of you. What he didn't realize, really, because I hadn't yet explained it to him, but I was always outnumbered or overpowered, whether that be by more people, stronger people, older people, or people with weapons. Like, the bullying was never on a level playing field. So the fact that I was a big guy had absolutely nothing to do with it. Furthermore, the two and only two times that I actually defended myself, I got suspended from school both times. Like, literally, it only happened twice. And I got suspended from school both times. So a lot of this stuff I either was forced to hide or I chose to hide over wondering what the response was going to be. With my dad, for example, I thought he would just dismiss it. And when everybody else around you dismisses it, you become to dismiss it yourself. And because I was hiding it, this forced me to mask my emotions, mask my feelings, and essentially get on with life. Now, one of the biggest things when it comes to the diagnosis of a mental illness, or even deciding whether a particular mental illness is a disability, is the question, how much does it impact your day-to-day life? And a lot of times they're saying, how much does it stop you from doing work? How much does it stop you from being a productive member of society? And for me, well, it didn't really. It didn't really stop me from being a productive member of society, especially not back then, because I didn't think I had any other option. I had to go to school. Then when I finished school, I had to go to work. I had no choice but to go to work. And what would generally happen for me is I would put on a brave face in work, didn't want anyone to ask what's wrong, didn't want to show that side of me, completely and utterly concealed it. I was not the open with my emotions man that you all know and hopefully love nowadays. I was very much masking and very much keeping that stuff to myself. Again, for fear of what might be said, for fear of other people's reactions. And that all fed into the idea of me being completely in denial about the fact that I had a worthwhile mental illness, that the fact that this was a disability to me. But what would happen at first is I would have periods where I would be hyper-focused in work when my mental health was up. And then I would have periods where I would struggle to get a lot done in work when my mental health was low. I really struggled with consistency. And that's the problem, is if we were to look at the amount of work I did over a month, it was the same, probably, if not slightly more than the amount of work that the other people on my team were doing within a month, because those periods of hyperfixation overcompensated for the periods of brain fog and not really necessarily being able to get things done, and of executive dysfunction, which I didn't know it was that at the time. I just thought, I'm a sad boy and I don't have motivation. That's what I thought it was back then. And if you were to compare that, I would probably get more done than the person that was consistent. But the workplace doesn't reward what you get done in a month or what you get done in a year. It rewards what you get done in a day. It rewards how busy you look throughout the course of the day. And because of my hyperfixation, when I was good, it went against me, because I would get an entire day's work done in a morning. And then my boss would come in and be like, look busy, like you're making the team look bad. That was said to me a lot. It's like, you're making the team look bad, like look busy. And I'm like, well, okay, good, give me more work. Or we've got not got any more work for you today. Okay, so what am I supposed to do? Well, you just need to look busy. Well, how am I supposed to look busy without work? And then what would generally happen with this is, over time, I would deal with all those emotions when I got home, rather than dealing with them in front of people. And by deal with them, if you've listened to this podcast for a long period of time, you'll know that that was food, that was alcohol. Drugs hadn't quite entered into the equation yet at this point, but it was very much food and a bit of alcohol at this point, a bit of TV binging, even though TV binging wasn't really a thing back then, because this was the dark ages of the early 2000s. And playing video games, escapism. And I concealed and covered up my emotions. Initially, I'd concealed and covered up my emotions from other people. And now I got to the point of concealing and covering up my emotions from myself. And as we all know, that when you basically bottle things up, it increases the pressure. And then eventually when those things come out, they explode. It's not just a kind of little trickle out the top of the bottle. It's like when you shake up a fizzy drink, open it, and it goes everywhere. It's Mentos in Diet Coke. It's that kind of situation. It's an explosive thing. And then when the depressive periods came, they came for a long, long period of time. Now, I was fortunate enough, I started my full-time job when I was 18. I was fortunate enough by the time I was 22 that I had an opportunity to leave that job and go and do things that were more freelance. And I have actually been freelance ever since, which I think has allowed me to continue working. But if I look at the process of all of that, if I look at the kind of trajectory or the history of all of that, I have had the same, what I used to have within the source of a day, i.e. small periods of being hyper-focused and very busy and very productive, combined with small periods of executive dysfunction and not being able to get much done at all. I've had that, and instead of being over days, it moved to being over weeks, months, and even years. Very much go through cycles of this. Consistency has been one of the hardest things for me to achieve. And I want to say hard and not impossible. And I want to pause and take a moment to actually be proud of myself, because if I look back, okay, if you've listened to the podcast for more than a few months, you'll know that tail end of last year, the consistency dropped right off. But if I look back, I think this is about episode 320 of a podcast. I have this history of someone who doesn't stick to things. 320 episodes is sticking to things. If you look at the shorts that I put up on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and all that place, there has been one of those a day, at least every single day for the whole of 2023 so far. That's like 3 full months of consistency. Not to mention the fact that there's about 500 videos in total that are up there. So that consistency is actually becoming to be there, and it is something that I'm better at. But it's that whole expression that some people say to me, and my boss at the NHS has said to me in the past, and I've asked him not to say this to me because of the way my brain works, is imagine how much you could get done if you could work at your peak all the time. Now, the reason why it took me a long time to come to terms with mental illness, or particularly my mental illness as being a disability, if someone else was off work with depression for months on end, I'd basically say that's a disability. If I had that internalized stigma. I wasn't willing to accept it. Oh, it's just like the world sometimes tells you to get over it or pull yourself together. Even though I know better, there is a small portion of my mind that still says those things to me from time to time. That still says to me that on the days where I'm doing nothing, or I don't get anything done, that my value, that my worth dips. And again, it's a part of me that I'm learning to re-educate. And I re-educate it usually by re-educating other people around it. There's an expression you may have heard me say before, which is on the days you feel you can do nothing and you do anything, then that means everything. And I've said that so much to other people now that I now do say that to myself when I take that time off work. But the truth of the matter is, my disability does stop me from being able to work consistently. It does mean that I actually have more mental health sick days than many people would have physical health sick days. It does essentially preclude me from being able to do a lot of things that people without mental illness can do. It also comes with some benefits in the fact that it gives me an authority when I speak on mental illness that people who are educated beyond me they can't get that. They can be more educated than I am, and a lot of them are, but they can't have that authority of the lived experience that's there. So it is both a blessing and a curse within the workplace. But as any of you with disabilities will know, there's more to life than just the workplace. There's more to life than how productive you are or how consistent you are. There's facts of things like being physically unable to go to social events or feeling like absolute hell all through people's big experiences like weddings, for example. I had a case of depression during my sister's wedding last year and had to mask it up and pretend to be okay when I was essentially crumbling inside the whole day because I didn't want to impact her day with my emotions. And I don't regret that, by the way. I think when it comes to masking, we shouldn't have to mask our emotions all the time, but I do think there is a time and place to do it, and I do think it is a skill to have. It is just do not keep that mask on all the time, because that's when we end up with the shook up bottle. That's when we end up with the emotions that aren't being allowed for. They aren't being given space for. And so over time, again, first by accepting that other people's mental illness is a disability, I finally accepted that mine is too. A lot of people, even within the mental health community, would say, would refer to it as my disability. And I'd be like, oh, I'm not disabled. Again, feeling two things. Feeling one, that I was doing a disservice to people with what I would refer to as legitimate physical disabilities. And then the second one, again, being that internalized stigma. not really wanting to admit it. Anyway, so yes, I would love to hear your thoughts on all of this. Dave@mindsetbydave.com, and obviously you can comment on this post on if you catch the YouTube version, if you can comment on it there, or wherever you find it on social media, you can comment on it there too. And there is a reason that I am now confronting this this question much more directly, because the most recent time it came up was when I got an email earlier this year from the National Diversity Awards, talking about that nominations will be opening soon for the following categories. And the National Diversity Awards is something I've supported for a couple of years because of other disabled creators, of people of colour, of LGBTQ creators, mental health advocates. I have supported this event because of that, and that's why I'm on their mailing list. It was never something I ever thought of for myself. And so I was like, okay. And I was like looking at it, I was going, there's a disability category. And again, even at that exact point, I was like, yet I don't have a real disability. And I remember sat down and had a word with myself, and I was like, Dave, if like one of your friends in the lived experience mental health field, if you would nominate them for that, and you would totally and utterly acknowledge their disability, why on earth are you not acknowledging your own? And the conversation ended there, and I didn't really do it. I didn't do anything. I didn't put myself forward or anything like that. And then about 3 or 4 weeks later, I get another email from them saying, you have been nominated in this category. And all of that internal question, stigma, dialogue, back and forth, all of that came rushing back. And I was stuck. I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know whether to accept this. And I even felt at that point saying, no, I don't have a disability. Not me. Not that person. But I have to accept that I do. And I have to accept that if I'm going to fight for the rights of other people with lived experience of mental health, that I can't be a bloody hypocrite. I can't sit on the fence about this one. I can't say, well, that's fine for this person, but not me. I can't do that. And as I say, it's only a small part of me that argues back at it, but it's loud. But this podcast is my way of formally checking my bloody internal ableism, checking my internalized stigma, checking all of that stuff, and saying, yes, my name is Dave Cottrell. I have bipolar disorder, which is a disability. I am disabled, and I am proud. And that is where I'm going to leave it. That is it. That voice, will it speak up and will it try and convince me otherwise? Probably. It's an old voice with lots of practice. It's said what it says 100,000 times, and therefore it knows the words by heart. But these new voices will speak louder and will speak clearer. With that in mind, I am actually up for that award. I have accepted the nomination, and there is links in the description of this for where you can basically nominate for me. National Diversity Awards. My name is Dave Cottrell, Cottrell. The link is like nationaldiversityawards.co.uk/nominees/Dave-Cottrell or something. You're not going to remember it by listening to it maybe. But if you search it on the site or if you look in the description. And I feel honoured to be out there representing for other mental health creators, lived experience educators who have overcome or are overcoming, or maybe not even overcoming, but learning to work with that consistency to the best they possibly can, learning to find a way that works in a world that doesn't want to work around their disability, to represent for those people. And I'm proud of the achievements I'm proud of the nomination. I'm proud of the community members that have voted for me so far. I get to read the what you write in the nomination as well, which is a very good way to make me cry, in a good way, the happy tears. So I'm proud of me. I'm proud of my disability. I'm proud of my community. And I'm proud of you too. So on that note, I'm going to disappear. And I'm going to say something along the lines of, what was the slogan we decided on? I can't remember. Wear your heart on your sleeve, but keep your mind on your heart. Until next time, catch you soon.